aren't able to join in but wanted to? Great, thank you. Yeah, so I don't know if you want to call on people, since everybody's muted, in the order that they're on their screen, or what you want to do. It's a small enough group, we can be informal. So if somebody has something really burning, jump in, but
Well,
otherwise.
Since you named them out, Polly and Anne Brusky, would you like to talk about what Karen was mentioning?
Sure. So through the Knoll program, we tend to do various workshops, talks, whatever, for artists in the Milwaukee area. And we've been working with artist Paul Druka, former Knoll fellow, to put together a 2-part workshop on how to create a website for an artist. And we're launching that this weekend. It's a 2-session workshop. We put it out there for free because we figure that's part of what we do, but we had a kind of overwhelming response to it. Had to shut down registration after about 35 seconds. And people were signing up from all over the place. So I've been talking to Karen about, creating a vast franchise of these workshops, but I mean, we would be willing to offer these a couple of times. We wanted to offer it this first time to see how it goes and what the feedback is. Our main interest is in making sure that Paul is compensated. We don't really have a lot of skin in this game, except that we like it associated with the Knoll program. But we're certainly willing to do that. Now we're looking at other possibilities for workshops that we're going to be offering artists. The other thing, and this is not something we're doing immediately, but I've been talking quite a bit with Rachel Hausman, who had suggested ideas about artist writers. And we've been talking about a proposal she's putting into 60 Inches from Center, a Chicago publication that's actually quite interested in developing a Milwaukee arm of its web publication. So I've been helping her with numbers for that, about how we could get some additional coverage for Milwaukee through an existing publishing arm.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Polly? All right, Anne Brusky.
I'll just say,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I really appreciate that both of those things certainly resonate with what we heard from at the town hall. And also, as you mentioned, your vast franchise of Paul's work, I think that that's one of the things that the Arts Board and Arts Wisconsin would be really happy to help with. So I love that you're focused on Milwaukee, and I love that you're willing to broaden that focus statewide and beyond, depending on how this goes with Paul. So thanks for keeping us posted on that. Sorry, Anne, didn't mean to jump in on you.
No worries.
No apologies. No. So Wisconsin Dance Council, we hosted a town hall end of January, and it was for, there was dance artists, studios, etc. And it really was a moment to network and connect. The nice thing is the reach with the town halls, we're able to, we have Milwaukee, Madison area, but we had a lovely reach of rural, so all different parts of the state. One thing that has come out of we've been hosting, this was our 5th town hall that we've hosted with Dance Council. And out of that, one thing that's come out is that artists have been requesting an area that they can network. So we've added to our website a networking tab, and their artists can enter their information. But then it's broken into 2 areas where it's for artists and then also creative support. So if artists are looking for something, there is references for creative support. It's just starting. So if you went there right now, you probably see only a couple of entries, but it is a resource that can collect this information. People can submit it and hopefully feed off of each other. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I would say about it. I think that's it, but that's what we've been working on. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So let's go over to Maureen. You've got deadlines coming up. You've got workshops going on. Can you tell us all about what's going on in the generator world?
Yes, so with the Generator Art program, we have a couple of professional development courses that are in the works. We just finished a workshop on writing artist statements. We have one hosted by Jenie coming up this week on creating a budget for art projects. We have one on virtual studio visits coming up, and one on updating your virtual presence. So how to make sure you're doing your best Instagram, Facebook, etc., art e-commerce sites. So that's what we have in the works for Generator Art, in addition to our regular grant program. The deadline is March 27th for that. We also have our music program that's up and running as well. So they are currently doing workshops for musicians on, let's see here. I think their current one is, again, the digital presence, but focusing on Spotify and Apple Music and how to get more streams. And they also have an upcoming deadline, which I should know off the top of my head, but I don't. So yes, we have our kind of regularly scheduled professional development programs along with that. And then in addition, we are working on creating kind of a gallery listings site for to kind of have a overall listing of galleries in the Milwaukee area and the artists that are represented. So that will kind of be a landing page for people who are interested in kind of getting an overview of what's happening in the Milwaukee area. Ideally, once things reopen, this will be a calendar where people can see upcoming arts events as well. Yeah, that's what we have in the works.
I'm multitasking and looking in the arts news because I know we've got the deadline for the music one in the arts news. So when I find it, I'll put it in the chat. Thanks, Maureen. All right. Jenie, you were mentioned in Maureen's talk. Is there something you'd like to bring forward?
Yeah, sure. So let's see, I guess I can speak to a few different things. One, I am teaching a webinar this week with Generator Art on how to build a budget for your art project. So that's happening this Wednesday. If there are any last minute signups or people who you think could benefit from this workshop, point them our way. At WVA, we're planning a series of professional development workshops to start this spring. So that's one thing we're getting in the works. And we've also just been regularly publishing in our newsletter as far as resources for artists. We just sent a list out in December, a list of mental health resources for artists during this time. Maureen and I also met after the last town hall and met with one of her colleagues at Generator to find out, see what we could find out about the Department of Workforce Development and if there's any data that they might have on labor, and specifically this question that came up about what information we have about the unpaid or underpaid labor that goes into this field or in other fields, and how that compares to economic output. And the short answer is there is not a lot of data collected on labor versus economic impact. We're mainly tracking economic impact. We're not really tracking labor. So that was one thing that came out of it. Maureen did send me the data from WEDC. WEDC published everyone who got a grant through them last year, through the We're All In grant, and just kind of like as an aside from the other work that I've been doing, I've just been going through that data, and it's fairly enlightening seeing like who is applying for this and who's getting grants and how many people were able to get 2 grants versus only get one of the grants. So that's been kind of interesting to see just how artists under the Arts Next code are doing compared to other industries. And then on personal level, in addition to the webinar I'm teaching with Generator, I've expanded my consulting in 2021. So I'm just working with a number of different organizations right now on best practices centered on artists, what it means to center things on artists and pay and address a lot of these really critical issues that we're talking about with equity with equity in our field. So that's
That's
the work
great.
that
Thank you. And since you called out EDC, Sam, you're on the call still, hopefully, and now would be a great time for you to weigh in and tell us something about what's going on today in Madison, besides what else you're doing out there.
I've been, this is my 12 o'clock lunch, so I've been eating my lunch during this meeting, so not making you guys walk through that. It's good, so I didn't want you guys to get jealous.
We would.
As many of you know, the governor's delivering his budget address this evening. And I mean, it is hot prime time entertainment. So it's streamed live if you want to hop on. Some of the highlights, especially as it relates to economic development, were already made public. And we're excited about those. Certainly, the governor over the weekend, in kind of a teaser to his budget, announced his proposal for $200 million investment in continued recovery. And so we at WDC, in that, would be entrusted to WDC, and we really look back on this past year as we were entrusted with CARES Act dollars, as so much of it being relief, and looking at 21 as recovery. And so it is $200 million from that budget announcement was in assisting small businesses. And so just to reiterate, as was the case first time around, certainly artists and creatives are small businessmen and women, and should be, and just know in this group that is a belief held strong. It's not just factual, it's a very held strongly by this WDC and Governor Evers. In addition to that, there are dollars that he proposed to be made available to promote entrepreneurship, especially in underserved communities, minority communities, women-owned businesses. And so, given we know that in Wisconsin, I think broadly, creatives and artists are disproportionately found in minority communities, and that's certainly data that's come out of the COVID relief. We're excited about that. As we look at it, and then finally there'll be a one-time $8 million investment WDC, the governor's calling for, to support local and regional economic development in those organizations responsible for that. And so there are a number of those local or regional organizations that are supporting the art sector. And it is our goal at WDC with Secretary Hughes to really begin speaking that, as Wisconsin supports its manufacturing sector, its water sector, its forest product sector, to encourage this group, as we try and do, to talk about the arts as a sector, so that we can justify it as we do as investments as an economic sector that drives the state's economy. And so when we look to local organizations, we'll be looking, in addition to all the other classic economic development organizations, arts organizations that are promoting economic development through the arts, and supporting those businesses will certainly be those local organizations that we'll look to work with. Now, I will note that this is the governor's proposal. Folks here are all savvy enough to know that the way governing and democracy works is there's a back and forth process with the legislative branch that will happen over the next several months. We're really excited about the governor's opening volley in this case. What we also know, just so you know, we are preparing for the same type of preparatory work we're doing, getting ready for what it would actually mean to implement proposals in the governor's budget. We are acutely aware of things happening in Washington. And as the Biden administration Rescue America plan, I think, or something like that, is coming down, and what that might mean for investments in local and state governments, and how and what those dollars would look like. Will they look, will those investments, will that stimulus come to the states, similar to the way CRF dollars, coronavirus relief funds CARES Act dollars came to states in 2020? And if so, there'll be some portion, I predict, of those dollars that will certainly be called for investment in economic recovery. And so we'll expect, as I look at faces here that we worked with last year, that will be advocates and partners as we need to make decisions on how to be really smart about investments. Should we be entrusted to be in part of the process to invest any new stimulus dollars, and acutely aware of the pandemic's disproportionate impact on creatives and artists. So I'm happy to take questions, as I mentioned to George, by email. We're pretty tight-lipped beyond that, since we don't want to steal the governor's thunder, who's making his budget proposal tonight. As he does, the full text of his budget proposal will drop. Folks that have been around the block more than I have, that either happens concurrently or immediately thereafter, but there'll be some good reading late this evening, if you're so inclined.
Yes, indeed. And if you really want to go into the weeds, DOA will put the budget out there so you can really go deep. Thank you, Sam. You know, it's almost like I heard the angels singing behind you when you were saying what you were saying, because I can't tell you how long the arts community has waited for somebody from EDC to say the words that you said. And so that it's wonderful. And you rightfully tell us all, you know, roll up your sleeves, guys. We got work to do here, and not only to make sure that it follows through in the legislature, but that if we are so lucky as to have federal dollars come our way, that we can be helpful in making sure that it's distributed in ways that we'd all be proud of. So
yeah, well, I just push back. I don't think it's luck. What I need and what I ask for is help from you with data and to help make the case. So I don't have at my fingertips the impact of the pandemic on the creative sector generally, or in Wisconsin, or at least updated numbers. So and I was on a call previously, and that information was made available to me, which is helpful. If that information, if you have it updated or that can be shared, I mean, they're just so we all feel it and know it, but that's not enough. Yep. We want to be able to make a case and have a really data-driven reason why we're making investments.
Most definitely. And I know Anne is working the polls, so I'm not sure she's going to be able to say much, but I do know that our Americans for the Arts and others are continually updating those numbers. So Great. We will have it for you.
Okay. So. I appreciate all your advocacy. And as, I mean, during the budget process, just for instance, there was the announcement of a $100 million fund of funds, announced a venture fund, and there were different voices, stakeholders that made public comments in support of it. So if as stimulus dollars come in, as the budget process rolls out, it's helpful when it's not just when voices from the outside are raising, and I think all of you do that, but I just encourage you to continue your advocacy on how important that is. It makes our job easier.
Yeah, speaking of data, so, you know, because I mentioned the data that you've already published about who in Wisconsin got the We're All In grants. Yep. Do you have that data broken down specifically for the arts industry? Because when I looked, I noticed that it was broken down to the first 3 digits of the next code. So it was 711, which for us means performing arts, spectator sports, and related industries. But the data wasn't there for like specifically people in the arts. So do you have that information that you'd be able to share with us?
That just as a matter of an email, and because DOR is really the entity that breaks it down quickly for us. It's our vendor or our partner in this process. And so we analyzed it when making awards or making decisions, and we're all in 2 and 3, down to the 6-digit NAICS code. So Jenny, I don't know why we couldn't. So let me see if I can break that down. It might be literally a push of a button by folks. If they're in the 3-digit, they can just expand it out to the 6-digit. So I'll see if that's available.
Right. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Great. All right. Since we're in that world, David Lee, do you have anything you want to add to the conversation?
Yeah, thanks, George. So, excuse me, 3 things. We just started our winter round of workgroup meetings. As I think many of you know, Imagine MKE was organized around this collective impact model with 4 main work groups, one in public policy, one in neighborhood partnerships, one in marketing and PR, and one in support for artists. The winter tranche of workgroup meetings have launched in late February. Public policies come together, and with 2 new co-chairs, Bella Runta and Rosie Petrie are 2 new co-chairs, and given that they're both artists, they have a unique perspective on wanting to organize artists in support of public policy priorities for the sector, which is incredible. Neighborhood partnerships met, and they have this really ambitious goal of creating 50 arts and culture installations or interventions in the next year in 5 target neighborhoods, so about 10 per neighborhood, which is a super exciting goal that they have. And they're also focusing these interventions surrounding the intersections of art, public health, public safety, and other sort of like public health-ish priorities, which will lead into the second thing I'm going to talk about. Just bookmark that for a second. Marketing and PR met, and they are focusing on sort of figuring out, helping bring together the marketing and PR groups in the Milwaukee area to collaborate on projects that help the arts and culture sector survive, revive, and thrive, coming out of COVID and coming into whatever the next phase is. And coming out of that conversation, I think some of the folks on this call are going to be pretty interested in this. There seems to be a lot of energy around this idea of doing an all city or region-wide celebration in the fall or something, ideally when there's higher penetration on vaccinations and people can potentially go back, but how do we sort of like goose the reentry? So more to come on that, but that seems to be an area of high energy and high interest. And our support for artists group is going to be meeting in the coming weeks to work on what their big project is going to be on this year. I think there's a lot of energy around Power Map about how, you know, artists in the Milwaukee community and the region are connected to power and what are the levers, right, to sort of pull. The second big thing that we're working on is, I don't know how many of you were at our annual meeting, but 2021 is the beginning of our focus on arts and health and public health outcomes. And so one of our key projects in that is we were funded by the Annie E. Casey Foundation to convene a cohort of arts leaders and public health leaders to build deeper connections and to figure out how this cohort of folks can basically prototype projects over the next period of time, work together, break down silos, and integrate arts more deeply, arts sort of writ large, right, into the civic fabric, but particularly in health, right? I think this is an area for us that we're incredibly focused on, given this moment where we're at in COVID and also coming out of COVID in the next year or so. And I think we all know that with the Center for Medicine and Arts at University of Florida, with the NeuroArts blueprint that's happening at Aspen, there are all of these initiatives around the nation that are beginning to really invest in this area. And we're trying to position ourselves with all of you in to be a part of that conversation, which I think is very, very exciting. And this Annie E. Casey Health Leaders cohort, I think, is sort of our first big down payment to that. And then I've heard some talk about research, and we are trying to figure out a deeper research agenda for Milwaukee and potentially in the sort of Southeast Wisconsin region. And so we'd be happy to chat more with folks who are interested in how we might be able to partner on research projects, particularly looking at whether it's what's already been talked about or impact on COVID or the needs post-COVID. Yeah, so top line, 3 big things that we're up to right now.
Very good. It's interesting you say that, and I'll just put a plug in for something that we're doing with Arts Wisconsin on the 25th, right, Karen? 25th of this month. And we're bringing forward the No, I take that back. It's the 19th. We're bringing forward the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies work called The Arts and Creativity Strengthen Our Nation. And it's a messaging frame that they worked with the Metropolitan Group out of Portland to rethink about how we argue for the importance of the arts in America. And so it's interesting in the notes that you were giving, David, because under that frame, they deal with 4 areas: the economic well-being, community, and education. So look forward to that. And we'll share that publication with you if you haven't seen it already, because I think you'll all find it very interesting and useful to your own communications. All right, I want to make sure we get everybody in here. And I see that Barry and Jody have not spoken. So Barry or Jody, who wants to jump in?
Go ahead, Barry.
Okay. Well, I'm feeling kind of bad because here the Writers Association, we've got hundreds of members, and they're all, the nonfiction writers, the kind that we hole up in our little writing place and we write stuff. And what that's the bad news. The good news is that we're different than we were a few years ago. We've got events happening every month, and thanks to Zoom, we're everywhere. It's instead of being in the wrong place, like, oh, I don't want to go to Madison, or I don't want to go to Appleton, hey, you got no choice. You can, no problem, go get on Zoom and do it. And so we are gathering writers in multiple events every month. So we've got their ears, and we've got the email list, and so we're in front of them a lot. And I am planning on to have a public policy chair on the board of the association this year, and at least in living memory, I don't think we've ever had anything like that. And but I think in order to put creatives, whatever they are, writers or any creative, back to work or to work and get them paid for their labor, that's a long-term thing that we have a great interest in, and so does our membership. So we're beginning to every time we touch our folks, we communicate with them or have events, we're talking about this. So it's going to increase over the year, and once we get a chair person to drive it who has a real kind of a knack for the thing, it'll get better. So that's where we are at the moment.
Excellent. Thank you. Jody.
Hi. So the Academy's primarily been a platform, through our gallery and our magazine. And so the thing that's been happening with us is a lot of internal discussion about how we can expand that. We are a statewide organization, so we don't focus on, Milwaukee or Madison specifically. And I see that as a way we could contribute, really expanding arts coverage in our magazine, finding ways to get that out digitally to a wider community. And I think it really would help to talk with Polly, with the people you're talking to in Chicago, or talk to Rachel, others who are interested in writing about the arts, not necessarily just the visual arts, but also performing arts, and finding a way to become a platform for reviews that's not just our print magazine, that expands beyond that. And there is a lot of interest among our staff in reviving something like Portal, a better, bigger Portal that is statewide, but we are not prepared, to do that alone. We really need to partner with others and pursue that. Our editor has talked a fair amount in these conversations about wanting to do a print arts guide. There's a certain amount of skepticism about print just because of deadlines. I think going digital would make more sense. So that's the direction of the conversations at the Academy. The other news, which isn't related to the town halls per se, but you should know that when the University of Wisconsin dropped Division of Continuing Studies Arts and Writing courses from its curriculum, It was kind of a blow, and we had a lot of conversations. Thanks to the folks at the Arts Board for helping facilitate that. And we are now piloting a series of just 3 this spring arts and 3 writing courses online using instructors from DCS, former instructors from DCS. It's a pilot for us. We think it will be very successful. We've been pleased with the response so far. We're going to take some time over the summer to evaluate and develop some new courses, and hoping to have this become a regular part of the Academy program. So that's a whole new direction for us. It's exciting, a little scary because we don't have the experience for this. But I think it could be of value for artists who are looking for teaching opportunities and writers looking for teaching opportunities going forward.
Thank you.
That's my news.
That's good news. I do need to let you know, or at least remind you, that Portal still exists, and it exists enough that it could be reframed and redone and reimagined, but the infrastructure is there. And so let's think about it and think about how that works. Portal Wisconsin was a project of the coalition, the Cultural Coalition of Wisconsin, and was funded through money from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. But the internet went different directions since it was originally founded, so it does need to be reimagined. But I want to make sure we know that it's there to tinker with. Maybe that's helpful. Maybe it's, you have to throw it over to the side and start afresh, but just in case, it's there. I have put in the chat the information on the messaging piece, as well as the research out of NASA now, the arts and in the creative recovery. So take a look at those things when you have a minute. Karen, is there anything you want to say from the Arts Board perspective that we haven't said already before we?
I've been busy in the chat, kind of as people have been talking.
Good.
I've been thinking about a few things. One of which I think really is about the Town Hall 2.0, and just, George, is it okay if we just move straight there? Or did you want to touch on something else?
If you're ready to go there, go there.
Yeah, it's really great to hear what y'all have been talking about and thinking about and doing. And I know Barry and Jody especially were like, yeah, we're here to support, whatever, let us know. But it's a critical role of partners to have that piece as well. So thinking about the second town hall, I am making the assumption that this is something that everybody would be interested in doing, and I want to not make that assumption. So I'm going to just stop and just see, does anyone feel like that is not something that they want to participate in? No damage, just checking my assumptions here. Okay. Seeing or hearing no body language that tells me otherwise. It seems that George and I were talking about the whys of this, one of which is that we promised, the other of which is we've got this amazing cadre of people who are hungry for and energized for this kind of work and connecting, et cetera. And it would be great to come back to them and say, all right, you voiced many things on December 1st. Now in March, we're checking back to see where you're at. This is what we're doing and thinking about. And a bunch of those bubbles have risen to the surface in this conversation. And I've talked about some of those in the chat. Jenny, I have way more notes than I put into the chat about what you're doing. Clearly, what the visual artists group is focused on, and your work on the labor is one of the major themes that came out of that town meeting that I heard anyway. But it connects with Polly's work, with Paul on the website stuff. Maybe instead of me saying, hey, Arts Wisconsin and the Wisconsin Arts Board would love to see if we could franchise that, maybe I step out of the middle and say, maybe that's something that you are already doing there, or that you might want to take on. So those are my initial thoughts about Town Hall 2.0.
Yeah, and so I think there are two questions on the floor about that. One is, yes, should it be done? And if it should, when and what would you want to inspire people to come ready to talk about, besides what they need to talk about themselves? Is there something thematically that you want to put out there for the conversation? and if you don't know the answer to that question now or those questions now, we're open to them after the fact. I do think one of the things is trying to get it on everybody's calendar as we turn towards the spring and know full well that at least in Madison, we'll be in silly season with the state budget for a bit and really dealing with that. But we want to make sure that we get it on everybody's calendar so we can get as full of participation as we can.
And so to that end, with 2 minutes left in our time here, does anyone feel free to share expressions of horror or anticipation? Does anyone feel like doing this by the end of March is possible? The second town hall? There is not, I don't believe, a lot of prep that needs to happen other than just getting the date out and just checking in with folks. All right, I saw a thumbs up, a nod, and no expressions of horror. So awesome. I will send out a doodle poll related to that, and we will see if we can get something in here. Maybe you could in the chat just tell me if there are days of the week to avoid or times of the day to avoid for you. That would be really helpful. Then I can craft that doodle poll with that information in mind. But yeah, looking to do this by the end of March.
I love that. It's no longer, we have consensus. It's, I see no horror. That's great.
We set the bar where we can. All right.
All right.
On that note,
even though we started a little late, we want to keep you to the time that we said we'd be out. So is there anything else for the good of the cause before we say goodbye to you all? And we thank Anne for listening in. She'd like it to have it in April so it can be part of Creative Wisconsin Month. Oh, that's an interesting idea. That's a very interesting idea. All right.
all right, y'all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for persevering. All right, bye.
Bye.